Well, hello and thank you for joining us today on Ask the Mayor. Today's program is the final session of a three-part series on the practical side of governing, recorded at the Georgia Municipal Association's annual meeting in Savannah. So please stay tuned for today's Ask the Mayor program.
Hi, I'm Shan Weeks with Keep Douglasville Beautiful, and my city TV is good for the environment.
Tell you what, let's change gear a little bit. We've talked a lot about taxes. It's all near and dear to our heart, but there's some other issues, infrastructure issues, that are also important, and nothing is probably no more important to us than water. The issues that we're dealing with water. And a limited supply of water is one of the issues that all of us in this room are dealing with. And with the passage of House Resolution 1022 that actually ratified the state water management plan, EPD will soon issue a call for nominations to the various water councils that will be created around the state. Of course, these appointments, I don't believe, include the North Georgia Water Planning District, which is also very active. My question to you today is, what are the expectations from these councils? And do you think that these steps that were taken in the last session were adequate to provide a sufficient supply of water to our cities in Georgia?
Well, I would just first say that I'm happy that we have a statewide water plan. I would want to see from, and it appears to be a plan to plan, the statewide water plan. But I would want to see, I believe is your question, from that council, in terms of my area, that those appointed to that council be representative of my area. And I would want to see them consider, I'd want to see consideration for those things that we currently have in place, and would want them to certainly address the future needs of my area from a growth and development standpoint and economic development standpoint.
Is the water plan enough? No, it's not enough. It's one of many things we have to do. We've done that. We'll see how that goes. And that's just one thing. We've set up provisions where it becomes easier to do other reservoirs. We put, I think, $40 million in the budget this year to do other reservoirs. We have a resolution on something with the Tennessee River, which if you've looked at, some people look at it and they think it was a joke that we're declaring war on Tennessee. The reality is we believe we can go to court, and there's only one court of jurisdiction, and that's the Supreme Court of the United States, and win that court case. And if we won the court case, there's a whole bunch of water up in the Tennessee River that's ours. Does that take care of the problem? No. But again, you start adding a number of these things together, you start coming up with it, rather than EPD coming out with a regulation a year ago basically saying that no one could open swimming pools. And if you live where Chip and I live, that's like declaring war on, what do you mean you can't open your swimming pool? I mean, if things got bad enough, I'd say, Chip, you can't open up the swimming pool in your backyard with 5 people. But I wouldn't say that to the subdivision or to the city pool where there's 200 people on it every day. Start off with an incremental, let's go after the individual swimming pool. That's the case where less people are there. And instead of EPD coming up with just a blanket, no one's going to be able to open up swimming pools, which huge problems in Metro Atlanta, if not other places. The whole process, this is similar to energy in many respects, I believe. There's no simple answer. You know, some people say you shouldn't drill an ANWR because that won't solve the problem. That won't solve all the problem, but it'll solve part of the problem. You shouldn't drill off the shore. Well, that's not going to solve all the problem. No, it's not, but it's solve the problem. Well, we shouldn't conserve energy. Opponents will say you shouldn't conserve energy because that's not going to solve all the problems. And all these individual things will not solve all the problems. But you start adding them all. E85, which I put in my vehicle. Well, that's good, but it's not going to solve all the problems. But when you start putting all these together, maybe you can solve a whole bunch of the problems. And I think the water plan is one of those things that maybe helps us solve part of the problem. A significant portion, maybe not. But that and some of these other things that we're starting to come up with, and then the Corps of Engineers maybe getting on the ball a little better, help us out quite a bit.
Mayor, I think you serve on the North Georgia Water Planning Council. Do you think our legislation has got us to the point we need to be in the state?
I was on that original water study committee that put the foundation under this plan. And then also I have served on the Metropolitan Water District, both in my city's term, and then the county appointed me to serve as their representative following. And I think the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District is a good model for people to follow. But as we look at this statewide water plan, we need to remember one of the things that Dr. Kirby Godsey told us Sunday afternoon. Don't wait to have a perfect plan. Take a good plan and run with it. There's no such thing as a perfect plan, and no plan, no matter how good it is immune from criticism. But we have finally, after 8 years from the time that first water study committee was authorized by the General Assembly, membership appointed, report made. We had a couple of years of rain, there wasn't a whole lot done with it, and then we started drying up again, and it began to move. So in 8 years, we finally got to the point that a water plan was passed. Not everybody will be happy, but it should be representative, these boards should be representative of all the stakeholders involved. And primary responsibility, or probably majority position, should be given to those who are in the provision business, the elected officials and the technical service utility providers. There's so much emotion often involved in this issue or any natural resource that if you let the emotional side run the show, you're going to get way out of whack. And we saw some of that in the Metropolitan Water District plan. The elected officials and the utilities and service providers have to be engaged to make a workable plan and to keep it viable for a long period of time. And that would be my caution as individuals in positions of leadership make their appointments or their recommendations for appointments. And I also think that as elected officials in the General Assembly, in the Senate and the House, that a primary responsibility is making sure that EPD remains responsive to the consumer, both the political consumer and the people of Georgia as well, because a lot of times you could get off kilter with their regulations, changing leadership, changing priorities, but the plan can work and it can be modified and tweaked over time. It doesn't need to be thrown out. If next year we decide it's not working, we need to go in and fix, make the minor corrections, but don't just break it down completely.
Mayor, as a city that borders Lake Lanier, we see every day the practical need for an effective water plan, because we see our lake, while it leveled off for a while, is starting to drop again. And it is going to continue to drop if the climatologist predictions are correct. We've got to get serious about developing new water supply sources. I agree with Senator Balfour. I'm skeptical about the effectiveness of fast-tracking reservoirs just because of all the challenges that we face environmentally and with all the different interest groups, how fast we can't really do that. But certainly I applaud the efforts to try to do that, and more importantly, to try to provide some funding to local governments to help pay for those expenses. The other thing is, Just like we're facing gasoline crisis now, and people are starting to adjust driving habits in the face of $4 gas, we've got to get serious about conservation too. We're not going to, it's like we're not going to build our way necessarily out of our traffic congestion. We're not necessarily going to be able to build enough reservoir capacity to meet our long-term water needs in this state. So we're going to, the water plan has got to have a fair and effective program, which it begins to have for water conservation, individual, business, and others. Local governments are facing, that are in the utility business, are facing real challenges right now in funding their water and sewer needs, because with the drought and with the water restrictions, our revenues are down. In our community, they are down significantly. And while our customers say, well, simply cut your expenses, that's easier said than done when most of your expenses are debt service, maintenance of your system. You still have to read the same number of water meters every month. You still have to provide the same customer service that you do. So the consequence is, in some cases, higher rates because the overall revenues have been reduced. So there are tremendous challenges facing us in supply, the need to conserve, and dealing right now, at least in the hopefully in the short term, with a financial crisis, if you will, in a lot of utility systems. And the consumer is out there saying, confused, because on the one hand they're being told to conserve, and on the other hand they're getting hit with higher rates because of the overall loss of revenue. So it's a real challenge for our cities.
I think we also need to, one quick comment, we mentioned on taxes, one size doesn't fit all in the water plan either. I mean, every county is at a different level of how much they're conserving, and when we just say 10% across the board, well, what about those counties and cities that have already been doing a good job? I mean, they're now being penalized for really doing that good job. For example, I know in my county, in Cherokee County a few years ago, we undertook a plan to get rid of the unaccounted for water loss and took it from 21% down to 5% over about 5 or 6 years. Well, that's pretty darn good. In fact, that's the lowest rate in Metro Atlanta. Well, when we were told to cut back 10%, we've already done a lot to get rid of water loss. I mean, what else are we supposed to do? And then you have a scenario where in extreme North Georgia, as Senator Balfour pointed out, you have rain that falls in Georgia and then flows into the Tennessee River, which we can't get our hands on because they drew the line improperly. Realistically, why should we prohibit those people from using water? Because it's just going to go to Tennessee anyway, so they shouldn't be under water restrictions. So the one-size-fits-all water plan is something I think we really need to work with and realize that the water situation in extreme northwest Georgia is different than the water situation in southeast Georgia. And we've got to allow the EPD or allow local people to make some local decisions and not have the EPD say this is exactly how it's going to be across the state, because that just won't work.
And a lot of that implementation needs to be done by rule, vetted through the Water Council rather than by legislative act that keeps the whole process shifting. If the Water Council is adequately appointed and local officials have a voice and the utility providers have a voice in the say, those local councils will formulate the rules for each of those districts. And that's why it's important that a lot of the meat is put on the bones by rule, by an EPD, where it can be changed more easily than through the legislature, and not get in there and let them just tear it all apart because somebody doesn't like something done in the Altamaha region when the folks up above the Etowah may not have a problem with it.
Well, those are all good comments. Let's address one other issue that's important to all of us, and that's transportation. And then what we'd like to do is open it up for your questions, for things that you'd like to have our panel's opinion on. That issue is transportation. As you know, all of us know that in the last session there were a number of bills that were introduced to do various things with respect to transportation. And nothing happened. GMA has done a survey of our membership, and I think 44% of our membership indicated that a municipal option sales tax would be the preferred method for them to deal with transportation issues and have funding for transportation issues. The governor, of course, has recently taken a position on transportation. He's addressing GDOT board. He's recommended a comprehensive transportation plan. He's embracing the rail system from the southern suburbs into Atlanta. My question to this panel today is, what do you think needs to happen in the next session of the General Assembly to address our transportation needs?
We came very close this last session of passing a plan. The House passed it, the Senate did not. The last day it failed by 3 votes. There was some concern with senators outside of Metro Atlanta that, as you heard yesterday in one of the sessions, that a suburb of, I don't know Savannah area here that well, but one of the suburb counties of Savannah here could vote against the transportation plan, and Chatham County, with all its population, could vote for it and force these counties outside to go along with it. So, you know, maybe one of the ideas is you do it different from Metro Atlanta than you do from South Georgia, but you have to have a transportation plan from my Metro Atlanta standpoint. That is a large area. Metro Atlanta must be an area. Gwinnett County cannot be its own area. You have to have the Metro Atlanta region, and that Metro Atlanta region needs to be a large view of it, not a small view of it. The traffic in Metro Atlanta, which is a hub in Georgia, has gotten so bad that it's hurting business, and we have to have that plan set up. I think if we had tweaked it just a little bit last year, we could have passed it and people would have voted for it. The argument that if Metro Atlanta is a region, which I believe it should be, and most people probably do believe it should be, if Forsyth County voted against it, but every other county voted for it, then Forsyth County would still be in. And the way the bill is drawn, that is true. I would have drawn the outer perimeter right through Forsyth County from Gwinnett over to Cherokee, and I would have designed it with exit ramps in Forsyth County, and I would have never built the exit ramps. I'd wait for them to pay their 1% sales tax so they ain't getting on the road. I mean, there's ways to take care of that problem. If you look at the transportation problems we have, if someone on the DOT board came up with the wish list of everything that was needed, it didn't look to be exaggerated, it looked to be a good list. It was something like $30 billion over the next 10 years. Well, that sounded to me like a $3 billion tax increase a year. Well, obviously, we're not going to do that. But if we could do a 1%, and then we could do some public-private partnerships, and we could do some other things, does that take care of the whole problem? No, but it would take care of a bunch of the problem. And hopefully in the next session, we'll see some movement. There was some movement recently, some of the things the governor said, and hopefully we can see some movement next year.
I think there were 2 problems that I foresaw. The most important problem was the fact that it was voted on at 11:55 on the last night or the last day of the session. And it's just not the way you ought to go about changing the Constitution. This issue is too important, and I understand all the political ramifications that were involved in an ever-changing plan. When it passed the Senate the first time, we had an ample opportunity to debate the issue and discuss it on the floor of the Senate for members of the body that are not part of the Transportation Committee. And I believe the first time it passed, overwhelming, there was no question. And I supported it at that time, but then it came back with 5 minutes to go, and there was no chance to debate. And so a majority of the members who had not been involved in the process had no idea what was in the plan. And that's a big problem if you're going to change the state constitution. But I think it was extremely close, and I agree with Senator Balfour that there does need to be a regional approach, specifically with Atlanta, but I think there also needs to be one more level of flexibility there, and that is for a county that may be on the outside of that region to join with another county or city so that they can tackle a local problem. And I'll give you a perfect example. Forsyth is not in the ARC, Cherokee is, and Bartow's not in the ARC, but Cherokee is. One of the big problems we have in my area is Highway 20, which goes through all 3 counties. If we were allowed to say, all right, let us have a local plan where we join forces with Forsyth and Bartow, and we solve the Highway 20 problem just among us 3, I think you would see a lot more support. So everywhere we can find flexibility for allow counties or even cities to work with the county. I was talking to Councilman Weatherford about the city of Ackworth, a very unique city, is located in Cobb County, but it touches Paulding County, Bartow County, and Cherokee County. If the city of Ackworth wanted to work on a transportation funding plan with Cherokee or Bartow, let them do that. Let them have that flexibility. So I think anytime you add flexibility into the system, you're going to find a lot more support.
Well, and I would say that I think we need a comprehensive transportation plan that is developed and comes from the state. I think the regional approach is good with a 1% tax, but I think the fact of the matter is in some small towns and cities and some very rural counties, 1% tax is not going to get them what they need in order to take care of the transportation problems that exist in those small towns or cities or those communities. And so I really feel there should be a plan that comes from the state, that the state takes some responsibility for all Georgians. I think that something obviously needs to be done in the Metro Atlanta area, and it needs to be done now, but my thought is that small cities and counties just would not generate enough revenue from a 1% tax to take care of their transportation problems, and we need a comprehensive plan and an approach, and responsibility needs to be led by the state.
One of the concerns I have about the legislation that was discussed is while the Atlanta metro area, while it may make sense there to have a common transportation plan, projects, etc., again, I'm talking about a one-size-fits-all. It may not be appropriate in all of the state for the RDCs to be, and I realize that came more out of the House and the Senate, for the RDCs to be the tool by which the boundaries are established, if you will. In our particular area, while we have a lot in common with our neighbors to the north especially, which is where most of our region is, it would probably be very difficult to convince a citizen of Toccoa of a more local type of transportation problem we might be having in Gainesville, when it may make a lot more sense for us to be working with our county or with a neighboring county to develop that plan. And the other thing I would say, in these areas outside of Metro Atlanta, when we talk about tax options, Senator Balfour, you said earlier about New York and about a 9% sales tax, and I agree with you on the point that there's a tolerance level that we're going to reach with how much people are willing to tax themselves locally through sales taxes. So in these areas where transportation, while it's important, it may not be the dominant issue in some areas of our states. If that were framed as a municipal sales tax, option sales tax, or what have you, where it could be used for things other than transportation, then that may be beneficial for the large part of our state outside of the Metro Atlanta area.
When we think of transportation, most of us think of roads. And if you look at the state, whether you're from Payhira or Waycross or wherever, Atlanta is the heart and the engine of the state. We've got to provide a means for each area to work as, and think of it as the heart and the arteries. When there's a clog somewhere, it's a problem. And for most of my life, I'll be 46 years old in October. We've been talking about the same issues and the same problems in transportation in Georgia, and it's time to take the bull by the horns and realize that if we choke off Atlanta, we shut down the economic engine of the state. If we continue to allow transportation to go without some kind of coordinated planning, without real involvement, you know, I'm going to step on toes when I say, and I know that all pavement is politics, but the DOT board should not be a political football tossed around. And those people that are working on that board should have a long-term vision for what this state can be. And it brings us back to the same answer. If you've listened to every question that's been asked today and every answer that's been given, you've heard the F word. It's flexibility. give us the opportunity at the local level to be flexible in making decisions and establishing partnerships either within our counties or with our neighboring counties or within a whole region to solve those problems. And it's one of those things that's guided by what's most important at the local level. Our transportation policies include particularly a request that LARP be more flexible. Right now we're giving LARP money based on population divided by road miles. They come in and then they may pay the same street in some of these little towns every year because that's the length of pavement they're going to get. We're not allowed to do any milling or prep work on those things. We had an idea to let us bank LARP money for maybe a period of up to 3 years and include prepping and milling so that we can improve a corridor, that we can improve a whole section rather than going back and paving a bunch of side streets and people being able to get from one neighbor's house to the other, but they can't get to their jobs. People are going to be driven by the fact that they're going to make choices about how they get to work, what kind of opportunities they have, and it all ties everything in back on cities. If we can create live, work, and play environments in Canton or in Gainesville or in Dallas, and they don't have to get out and spend $4 or $5 for a gallon of gas. If the services are there locally, they feel safe in their homes at night, their children are well educated, they're going to be there. It's going to cut down a lot of those problems. But it all comes back to being flexible and realizing that at the local level, if we preserve home rule and our rights and if we make decisions based on what our people want, we can solve a lot of those issues rather than that top-down authority.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. I was hoping that we would be able to take some questions, but I'm sure our panel will be around after the program is over today. For individual questions, I would personally like to take this opportunity to thank each of them for their honest and thoughtful answers to these very difficult questions that were posed to you today.
Inactive activities on a glorious day. Huh? Let's get out there and play!
Sweet.
PLA. There are lots of great play ideas online.
Excuse me, what time are you guys leaving? We're gonna rob your house tonight.
Don't come closer. I have rabies.
Don't you wish there were warnings to protect you from life's risks? With diabetes, there is one. It's called A1C, a simple blood test that helps measure your risk of a heart attack and other complications. Learn more at diabetesaonc.org.
Well, thank you for joining us on today's Ask the Mayor program. This was the final of the three-part series on the practical side of governing from the Georgia Municipal Association's annual meeting. Thank you for joining us today.